This is Mag212, and this is my mod guide for the new N-Strike Elite Demolisher. So without further ado, I will remove all the screws from the Demolisher and open it up so that we can start modifying it. Now that we've gotten all the screws out of the way, you can just lift this top little handle off the rocket launcher, and then you should be able to pry the rest of the Demolisher apart. Be careful and don't yank too hard because there are wires connecting the two sides of the shell and the handle right here. So that's that, and you can just set it aside like this for now, and we'll be taking care of the wires later. This may look very familiar to some of you, maybe because it's just a reshelled strife. So I'm just going to be removing some screws so that I can take a closer look at the wires. Remove this top little screw right here, which is holding the little dart pusher in, and then after that you can just kind of pull it off like that. You don't have to take it out completely. That's just so that we can get at the trigger and remove the trigger so we can take a closer look at the wires. I will also be removing this little plate so that we can access another mechanical lock. Right here is a mechanical lock. All you have to do is pull it out. This lock right here prevents you from pulling the trigger if you're not pushing down the rev trigger, so I'm just taking this out. You could throw it out or whatever. So after that, I'm also going to remove this screw up here so that I can take off this little piece and remove the access door. Now that we've taken some of the stuff out of the way, we're going to take a closer look at the electrical aspect of this gun. Here's our classical thermistor. You just have to remove this screw, which is holding it in, just like the strife. This prevents you from using high voltage, and as modders, that's exactly what we don't want. So I'm just going to take that, and I'm going to be unscrewing this, because this is also a mechanical and electronical lock. It prevents you from pushing the trigger if you don't have a clip in the gun, and it's also a electronic lock that prevents you from revving the flywheels if you don't have a clip in the gun. Taking it out is fairly simple. Just remove all of the screws that are holding it down, and then you can take it. This is the mechanical lock. You have to take it out. Note that if you take this out, you do have to rewire your gun, so you need to take that out, and then we're just going to snip all these wires and get rid of everything so that we can rewire it. Basically, at this point, you just have to take out all the screws, like this screw here. This holds in the electronic lock, this little switch that prevents you from revving your motors if your access door is not closed. So now we're going to need to snip some of the wires. So what I'm going to do is I just need to get these wires out of here. This is basically just what goes to your battery pack. These are the positive and negative terminals. Then you can just clip right here and just clip these off. It's all unnecessary wiring. The brown wire is the negative coming from the battery, and the red is the positive. So what I'm doing is I'm just clipping these, and I'm going to leave a little bit just so that I can resolder a wire there. But for now, you're just going to need to keep those wires in there and this little switch, because this is what your rev trigger comes in contact with, and you just need to pull the rest of the wires out because they're just unnecessary, and when you rewire your gun, you're not going to need them anyway. I've removed these pieces from the front of the gun right here, just so that I can get at the flywheel system. You're going to need to unscrew these 4 little screws to get at the flywheel system, and you're going to need to get at it because we're going to have to rewire it, because there's bound to be some kind of resistance in there that's preventing you from using upgraded voltage. If you notice that after you unscrew the flywheels that the wires just go into the shell, it's because Nerf has done something really annoying. They weave the wires inside the shell so you can't actually get to them. So you kind of just need to clip these wires right here. I've cut off these locks, all of these locks, and I had to take all of the wiring out. So there's no way that you can hide the wires because Nerf glued their shells together, and they make it really hard for modders on purpose. So all I'm left with is basically the rev trigger. I basically took everything out of the gun. I just decided to take it all out, and I'm gonna have to start from scratch and run wires to the motors. So now it kind of seems like Nerf is being difficult on purpose for modders because they don't want people to modify their guns. Yeah, we get the message. So what they've done now is they have these wires going in there, and I just realized there's a thermistor in here, and it prevents you from using upgraded batteries, and it shuts down your circuit because it's sensitive to how much voltage you're putting through it, so you don't make it more powerful and hurt the motors or hurt someone else. So in theory, you should be able to remove these screws right here if the two parts of the shells aren't solvent welded together. And I never noticed this before, but now I know why. There are two tones of orange on the shell. It's because it's two different parts of orange. Coop772 mentioned this, that there were clashing tones of orange. It's because, look, they're two separate shells, and they just put them together. So you can do either one of two things. You can unscrew that screw and lift it off nicely, or you can do what I'm about to do and tear it off with needle nose pliers. So after you take off this thermistor, that'll allow you to use upgraded voltage. And what you're going to want to do now is you're going to have a red wire soldered to that lead right there, and just bring it through this little hole right there along with the brown wire, and go out of this shell and to the other side of the shell so that you can connect it to your rev trigger. These are what the flywheel motors look like. No real difference from the Strife, but supposedly they're better motors because now Nerf's claiming 90 feet instead of 75 feet. So what you want to do is just clip these yellow things off, but don't rip off these little points right there, because these are where you solder your things, these little silver things. So you're going to want to clip them very carefully with a wire cutter, and then you're going to solder a red wire on this side and a black wire on this side. And if you don't know what I'm talking about because you haven't modified a electrical flywheel gun, I'll show you later. Once you resolder your motors, you're going to want to take a red wire and run it from there to there. I've stripped it on both sides and in the middle, because in the middle you're going to have a red wire going, and you're going to weave it through your shell like this. The red wire should be soldered to the bottom prong of this little switch, and I just made the wire really long so that I can weave it through and make it shorter if I need to. The same thing with the black wire. You have a black wire from there to there, and you strip the ends so you can solder them to the leads right there. I know it's kind of hard to see the black wire on the black motor, but it's the same thing as the red except on these two sides. The red wires have to go on the side that's closest to the front, and the black on the closest side to the back, so that your wheels will be spinning in the correct way. The black wire does not go to this switch, however. It must be longer because it's going to go down and to the other side of your shell on the negative terminal on the battery. So it's just as simple as that. You take two wires on the motors, red toward the front of the motor, black. Have a red wire going from the red motor going to the bottom of this little switch right here, and then you have a black wire coming from this black wire over here going to the negative wire that's connected to your negative battery port. So that's why you didn't cut this wire completely, because you're going to need to solder this wire to that wire. This red wire right here is going from the middle of the switch right here, the middle prong, and it's going to the positive, which is the top of the battery terminal. And I weaved it through this little hole because when you close the shells you don't want to crimp the wire. So now a quick and easy mod for the rocket launcher on the bottom of the Demolisher. If anyone's ever opened this, they'll notice that the seal on this is terrible and there's a whole bunch of dead space there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to remove this O-ring and then put Teflon tape underneath it, and I'm going to fill the dead space right here with hot glue. So I put Teflon tape under the O-ring, re-lubricated the O-ring, and filled the dead space with hot glue. Honestly, if you're only going to do one mod to this, probably modify the rocket launcher because it's the simplest thing to modify. All you have to do is basically take off the handle. You don't even have to separate the two halves. And then you just fill this with hot glue, let it sit, put some Teflon tape just so that you could get a better seal. And now the seal is very good and it should improve the distance of the rocket launcher. At this point, you're basically done. Just make sure that your rev switch works by pushing it down. And now we just have to take our parts and reassemble the gun. This is what your blaster should look like once it's reassembled. So if you need to know how to reassemble yours, pause the frame here. I apologize, I know orange on orange is pretty difficult to see, but hopefully you know how to put your gun back together from this. So now I'm going to close the two halves of the shell, reinsert the screws, and show you a firing comparison. So as you can see from the firing test, the performance of this gun has been greatly improved over its stock form. In the firing demo, I was running the Demolisher on 4 lithium-ion batteries, and as you could see in here, it sounds like a monster and it shoots crazy hard. The rocket launcher is also getting much better ranges now that I've plugged the pump and filled the dead space. Overall, I'm really happy with this mod guide, even though it's pretty tricky. So that's the end of the mod guide. Thanks for watching.